Someone is manipulating you right now. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way you imagine when you hear that word. Not with threats or ultimatums or visible cruelty. They are doing it with kindness, with favors you did not ask for, with silences that make you anxious, with compliments that feel slightly too generous, with questions that seem innocent but are designed to extract exactly the piece of information they need to position themselves above you without you ever noticing it happened. And the worst part, the part that should genuinely disturb you, is that by the time you realize what they have done, it is already too late. The concession has been made. The information has been given. The boundary has been moved. And you are standing exactly where they wanted you to stand, feeling exactly what they wanted you to feel. Believing, sincerely believing that every step you took was your own choice. This is what manipulation actually looks like. Not force, not violence. Not anything that would trigger your defenses. It looks like a conversation. It looks like a friendship. It looks like love. And that is precisely why it works. Because the most effective manipulation is the kind that the target never identifies as manipulation at all. 500 years ago, a man named Niccolò Machiavelli watched this mechanism operate at the highest levels of power in the courts of princes, in the negotiations between nations, in the intimate betrayals between people who had sworn loyalty to each other. And he understood something that most people still refuse to accept. Manipulation is not an aberration. It is the default operating system of human social interaction. Not because people are evil, because people want things. And wanting things, in a world where resources and attention and power are limited, creates an incentive to influence the behavior of others in ways that serve your own interests. Machiavelli did not condemn this. He did not moralize about it. He simply described it with a precision and an honesty that made him one of the most hated thinkers in history. Because the world does not punish liars. The world punishes the people who tell the truth about lying. This video is not about becoming a manipulator. It is about something far more valuable and far more difficult. It is about becoming someone who cannot be manipulated. Not because you are paranoid. Not because you have withdrawn from human connection, but because you have learned to see the mechanisms clearly, precisely, without illusion. And that sight, once acquired, makes you immune to every technique that depends on your blindness for its effectiveness. The first rule Machiavelli would teach you is this: never trust a favor you did not request. This is the mechanism that catches the most intelligent people, because it operates through generosity. And generosity is the one vector that most people's defenses are not designed to detect. When someone gives you something you did not ask for, a compliment, an introduction, a gift, a piece of advice, access to something valuable, your brain does something automatic and almost impossible to override. It creates a debt, not a financial debt, a psychological debt, a sense of obligation that sits in the back of your mind and subtly, persistently influences your behavior toward the person who gave it. This is called the reciprocity principle, and it is one of the most well-documented mechanisms in behavioral psychology. And the people who understand it, the people who have studied power the way Machiavelli studied power, use it deliberately. They give first, they give generously, they give without being asked, and then they wait, because they know that the debt is accumulating, that every unrequested favor is a thread being woven into a net that will, at the right moment, be pulled tight. And when that moment comes, when they finally ask for what they actually want, you will give it. Not because you want to, because the weight of unearned generosity has made refusal feel like betrayal. Think about the last time someone did something unexpectedly kind for you. Someone you did not know well. Someone whose motivation was not entirely clear. How did it make you feel? Grateful, yes. But also, if you are honest, slightly uneasy, slightly indebted. slightly aware that the balance between you had shifted in a direction you did not choose. That unease was your instinct trying to warn you. And the rule, the dark rule that Machiavelli understood and that most people learn far too late, is simple. When someone gives you something you did not ask for, do not accept the gift at face value. Ask yourself what the gift is purchasing, not because every act of generosity is strategic, but because the ones that are strategic are indistinguishable from the ones that are genuine, and the only way to protect yourself is to evaluate the pattern rather than the gesture. Isolated generosity is kindness. Systematic generosity from someone who wants something from you is investment, and investments always expect returns. The second rule, watch what people do when they think you are not paying attention. Machiavelli understood that the most accurate information about a person's character is never found in their performance. It is found in their defaults, the behavior that emerges when the social pressure to perform has been temporarily removed, the way they treat people who cannot benefit them, the way they speak about others when those others are not present, the way they handle small, inconsequential situations where the stakes are too low to justify performance. These micro-behaviors are the real data. Everything else is theater. And most people, because they are focused on the theater, because they are responding to the performance, rather than observing the performer, miss the data entirely. They are surprised when the person who was charming in public turns out to be cruel in private. They are shocked when the colleague who was supportive in meetings turns out to be undermining them behind closed doors. They are devastated when the partner who performed devotion turns out to have been performing all along. None of these revelations are surprises. They are the inevitable consequences of paying attention to the wrong information. The manipulator knows this. The manipulator knows that you are watching the show, not the rehearsal. And so the show is perfect, calibrated, polished, designed to create exactly the impression that serves their purpose. But the rehearsal, the unguarded moments, the small choices, the behavior that happens when nobody important is watching, that is where the truth lives. Machiavelli's rule is devastatingly simple. Judge people by their patterns, not by their performances. A person who is kind to you but dismissive to a waiter is not a kind person having a bad moment. They are a strategic person who has decided that you are worth performing for, and the waiter is not. And that calculation, that cold, precise division of the world into people worth impressing and people who can be discarded, tells you everything you need to know about what will happen to you the moment you stop being useful. I want you to sit with that for a second, because this is the point where most people push back. They say, no, that person was just having a bad day. They were stressed. They did not mean it. And those excuses, those generous, kind, well-intentioned excuses, are exactly the shield that the manipulator is counting on you to provide. They are counting on your decency to overwrite your perception. They are counting on your desire to see the best in people, to blind you to the worst in them. And your decency, weaponized against your own judgment, is the most effective tool they have. Machiavelli did not say you should assume the worst about everyone. He said you should observe without excusing. Let the data accumulate. Let the pattern reveal itself. And then, when the pattern is clear, when the evidence is no longer ambiguous, have the discipline to believe what you have seen, rather than what you wish were true. But knowing who someone is when they think no one is watching is only half the defense. The other half is controlling what they know about you. And that brings us to the third rule, perhaps the one that, once internalized, will change the most about how you navigate every relationship and every conversation for the rest of your life. The third rule, never reveal your full position. This is where Machiavelli's thinking becomes almost painfully relevant to everyday life, because the instinct to be transparent, to share what you think, what you feel, what you want, what you fear is so deeply embedded in most people's social conditioning that violating it feels like a kind of moral failure. You were taught that openness is trust, that sharing is connection, that vulnerability is strength. And in certain contexts, with certain people, those things are true. But Machiavelli would tell you, and he would be right, that they are true only when the person you are sharing with has demonstrated, through sustained and consistent behavior, that they will not use what you reveal against you, and until that demonstration has been made. Every piece of information you share is a potential weapon you are handing to someone whose intentions you have not yet verified. Think about how manipulation actually works in practice. Someone convinces you to do something you would not otherwise do. How? By knowing what motivates you, by knowing what you fear, by knowing what you want badly enough to compromise your judgment. And how do they acquire this knowledge? You tell them. You tell them in casual conversations. You tell them in moments of emotional openness. You tell them because they asked the right question at the right time. And you answered honestly because you had been taught that honest answers are always the right answers. They are not. Honest answers are appropriate answers when the person asking has earned your honesty. And earning your honesty is not accomplished by asking for it. It is accomplished by demonstrating, over time, through actions rather than words, that they are safe to receive it. Machiavelli's rule is not about becoming dishonest. It is about becoming selective. It is about understanding that information is currency, and that spending it freely, without evaluating the recipient, is not generosity. It is negligence. The dangerously smart person does not lie. They simply do not volunteer the truths that could be used against them. They answer questions with questions. They redirect personal inquiries with graceful deflection. They share enough to maintain connection, but never so much that the connection becomes a liability. And the people who are frustrated by this, the people who pressure you for more disclosure, who accuse you of being closed off, who insist that real relationships require total transparency, those are often precisely the people from whom your instinct to withhold is protecting you. Because a person who respects your boundaries does not pressure you to remove them. Let me say that again, because it is the kind of sentence that needs to be felt, not just read. A person who respects your boundaries does not pressure you to remove them. They do not guilt you into sharing more than you are comfortable sharing. They do not frame your discretion as a personal rejection. They do not tell you that if you really loved them, if you really trusted them, you would open up completely and give them access to everything inside you. That framing, the framing that equates love with total exposure, is itself a manipulation. It is a mechanism for removing your defenses under the guise of deepening intimacy. And Machiavelli would recognize it instantly, because it is precisely the kind of technique he watched princes use on their rivals. The demand for trust that is actually a demand for disarmament. Now, the first three rules deal with what you give and what you observe. The fourth rule shifts to something different. Something that requires not just restraint, but a fundamentally different way of processing the information you receive. Because the manipulator does not only work through grand gestures, they work through accumulation, small, repeated, almost invisible actions that only become visible when you learn to see the sequence rather than the moment. The fourth rule: identify the pattern before you respond to the event. This is the rule that separates the person who is perpetually caught off guard from the person who seems to anticipate everything before it happens. And the difference between them is not intelligence, it is attention. Most people respond to events. Something happens, a comment, a behavior, a decision, and they react to it as if it were an isolated incident. They address the surface. They deal with the symptom. And then they are surprised when the same thing happens again, in a slightly different form, from the same person, using the same underlying mechanism. The person who cannot be manipulated does not respond to events. They respond to patterns. They observe the first incident and they do not react. They file it. They observe the second incident and they note the similarity. They observe the third incident and they recognize the structure, the repeating architecture of behavior that reveals what the other person is actually doing, which is almost never what any single event viewed in isolation would suggest. Machiavelli was a master of pattern recognition. He did not evaluate individual actions, he evaluated sequences. He understood that a person who betrays once might be acting from circumstance. A person who betrays twice is acting from character. And a person who betrays 3 times is acting from strategy, and treating them as anything other than a strategic threat is not kindness. It is self-destruction. Apply this to your own life. Think about the person who consistently makes you feel guilty, not once, not as an accident, but as a repeating dynamic. Think about the colleague who consistently takes credit in a way that is just ambiguous enough to deny. Think about the friend who consistently creates crises that require your attention at the exact moment when your attention is needed elsewhere. None of these are coincidences. They are patterns. And the moment you begin to see them as patterns, rather than as isolated events, the entire manipulation collapses, because manipulation depends on your willingness to treat each instance as new, as unconnected, as deserving of the benefit of the doubt. Remove that willingness, and you remove the mechanism's ability to function. You do not need to confront the pattern. You do not need to announce that you have seen it. You simply need to stop responding to the individual events as if they were surprises, because they are not surprises. They are iterations. And the person who can see the iteration while it is still in progress is the person who can choose not to participate in its conclusion. I want to be clear about something here, because I think it matters. Seeing patterns does not mean becoming suspicious of everyone. It means becoming observant. There is a difference, and the difference is enormous. The suspicious person assumes bad intent and looks for evidence to confirm it. The observant person assumes nothing and lets the evidence accumulate until it speaks for itself. Machiavelli was not suspicious. He was observant. He did not start from the premise that people are bad. He started from the premise that people are strategic, and that understanding their strategy is not cynicism but self-preservation. The moment you learn to see patterns, you stop being surprised by people. And the moment you stop being surprised, you stop being vulnerable to the specific kind of manipulation that depends on your surprise for its effectiveness. You become, in the most literal sense, someone who saw it coming. And the person who saw it coming is the person who had time to choose their response, rather than being forced into a reaction by something they never expected. But pattern recognition protects you from the manipulations you can see. There is another category, more subtle, more pervasive, more difficult to defend against, and that is the manipulation that operates not through action, but through argument, through the appearance of rationality, through the seductive feeling that you are having a real conversation when, in fact, you are being managed. That is what the 5th rule addresses. The 5th rule: never argue with someone who has already decided. This is the rule that will save you more energy than any other, because the amount of life force that most people waste on arguments that were never winnable is staggering. Machiavelli understood that there are 2 kinds of disagreements. The first is a genuine difference of perspective to people who see the situation differently, who are both open to new information, who are both willing to adjust their position if the evidence warrants it. This kind of disagreement is productive. It is worth your time, it is worth your energy, it is worth your words. The second kind of disagreement is theater. It looks like a debate, sounds like a discussion, and performs all the rituals of intellectual exchange. But the other person's position was fixed before the conversation began. They are not listening to your arguments. They are waiting for your arguments to end so they can restate their own. They are not evaluating your evidence. They are scanning it for weaknesses they can attack. They are not interested in being changed. They are interested in winning. And the moment you engage with this kind of disagreement, the moment you invest your time and your emotion and your carefully constructed logic into trying to change a mind that was closed before you opened your mouth, you have already lost, not the argument, something more valuable. You have lost the time and the energy and the clarity that could have been directed toward something that would actually yield a return. The dangerously smart person learns to identify a closed mind within the first 2 minutes of a conversation, not through any mystical ability, through observation. The closed mind does not ask genuine questions. The closed mind does not pause to consider. The closed mind responds to your point, not with a counterpoint, but with a redirection back to their original position, restated in different words, as if you had not spoken at all. Once you have identified this, the rule is absolute. Disengage, not with drama, not with a declaration that you are done. Simply stop investing. Let the silence grow. Let them fill it with their own certainty. And redirect your energy, that precious, finite, irreplaceable energy, toward the people and the situations where your words have the power to actually change something. This is not cowardice. This is strategic economy. It is the understanding that your energy, your time, and your emotional capacity are finite resources, and that wasting them on unwinnable engagements is not integrity. It is negligence. The strongest thing you can do in the face of a closed mind is to leave it closed and walk away with your resources intact. Because the person with the closed mind has already spent everything they have on maintaining their position. You still have everything. And everything, when it is directed wisely, is how you build a life that no amount of manipulation can dismantle. We have now covered 5 rules, 5 layers of defense against the mechanisms that most people never see until it is too late. But there is a 6th rule, and it is the deepest. It is not about what you observe, or what you withhold, or what you recognize. It is about what you are, about the structural foundation of your life and your psyche. Because the ultimate defense against manipulation is not a skill, it is a state of being. And Machiavelli understood this better than anyone who has ever written about power. The 6th rule, the most dangerous person in the room is the one who needs nothing from you. Machiavelli observed that every form of manipulation requires a lever, a point of vulnerability through which influence can be applied. And the most common lever, the one that is exploited more frequently than any other, is need. When you need something from someone, approval, affection, inclusion, validation, professional advancement, emotional stability, you are vulnerable, not because need is weakness, because need creates predictability. And predictability, as we have established, is the raw material from which manipulation is constructed. The person who needs nothing from you cannot be influenced by you. They cannot be bribed with affection. They cannot be threatened with withdrawal. They cannot be controlled through the conditional distribution of whatever you have that they want, because they do not want anything you have. And that independence, that genuine, structural, unperformable independence, is the most destabilizing thing you can encounter in a social dynamic. Because all of your tools stop working. Every mechanism you have learned from managing people through generosity, through guilt, through emotional leverage, through the implicit promise of continued relationship, all of it becomes irrelevant in the face of someone who will be equally content whether you stay or leave. This is why Machiavelli argued that the most powerful position is the position of genuine self-sufficiency, not emotional coldness, not isolation, but the authentic demonstrated reality that your well-being does not depend on any single person's continued presence or approval. Because the moment you achieve that, the moment it is genuinely true, not performed, but real, you become immune to the single most effective tool in the manipulator's arsenal. You become someone who cannot be threatened with loss. And a person who cannot be threatened with loss cannot be controlled. Period. Building this independence is not a weekend project. It is the work of years. It requires you to identify every dependency, emotional, financial, social, psychological, and systematically reduce each one until it no longer has the power to override your judgment. It requires you to build a life that is rich enough, stable enough, internally resourced enough that the removal of any single element does not collapse the whole structure. And it requires you to do this not from a place of fear, not as a defense mechanism against a hostile world, but from a place of genuine self-investment. Because the person who has built that foundation is not cold. They are free, and freedom, in any negotiation, in any relationship, in any human dynamic, freedom is the ultimate leverage. I want to bring all of this together now, because these rules are not separate principles. They are a single system, a way of seeing human interaction that once adopted changes everything. The person who cannot be manipulated is not paranoid. They are not distrustful. They are not cynical about human nature. They are simply literate. They can read the dynamics that most people cannot read, the patterns beneath the performances, the strategies beneath the gestures, the calculations beneath the kindness, and that literacy does not make them less human. It makes them more human because they are engaging with reality rather than with the comfortable, edited, heavily filtered version of reality that most people prefer. Machiavelli was not a villain, he was a diagnostician. He looked at the body of human social behavior and he described what he saw. The infections, the fractures, the chronic conditions that most people either cannot see or refuse to acknowledge. And his prescription was not cruelty, it was clarity. The clarity to see what is actually happening in the room. The clarity to distinguish between performance and pattern. The clarity to recognize when generosity is genuine and when it is strategic. The clarity to know when a mind is open and when it is closed. The clarity to understand that your independence is your most valuable asset, and that anything, any relationship, any obligation, any emotional dependency that compromises that independence is a threat to your sovereignty, no matter how pleasant it feels in the moment. This is what it means to be someone who cannot be manipulated. Not that you have become harder, that you have become clearer, not that you trust less, that you verify more, not that you love less, that you love with open eyes rather than with the desperate, clinging, boundary-dissolving love that the world romanticizes and that manipulators exploit. You love and you watch. You give and you observe. You trust and you verify. And the people who are worthy of your trust, your love, your generosity, the people who pass the tests that you no longer skip, those people will not be offended by your discernment. They will be grateful for it, because they know that what you give them is given freely, from a position of strength rather than from a position of need. And that kind of giving, selective, conscious, sovereign, is the only kind that creates genuine connection rather than dependency, dressed up as love. If this video reached something in you, if you recognized a pattern you had been living inside without seeing it, a dynamic you had been participating in without understanding it, a manipulation you had been enduring without naming it, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments, not the theory, the moment, the specific person, the specific conversation, the specific instant when you realized what was happening. Write it down. Not for me, for yourself. Because naming a mechanism is the first step to disabling it. And a mechanism that has been named can never operate in the same way again. If you are not yet subscribed, and you have watched this far, which means something inside you already knows this is where you belong, then stop hesitating. Subscribe, not because I need the number, because you need the reminder. Every week, a new video. Every video, a deeper layer. Every layer, a piece of the blindness removed. And once the blindness is gone, once you can see the game for what it is, you do not become cold. You do not become cynical. You become the most dangerous thing a person can become in a world built on manipulation. You become free. Hit the like button. Share this with the one person in your life who needs to hear this. You know exactly who I mean. And I will see you in the next one. It goes deeper. It always goes deeper.